we are talking to Artis Stevens today. Welcome to the show, Artis.
Laura, thank you so much for having me here.
We're so excited to have you. And before we get started, I just wanted to ask you this kind of offbeat question. Um, if you are what you eat, what are you?
Oh my goodness, that's a really that's a really good question. I would it depends on the day, but I'm gonna go
Hmm.
sweet today because I got a sweet tooth today, so I'm gonna say apple pie. I'm
Apple
apple pie.
pie. All
I am
right.
apple
All
pie
right.
today.
Okay, now do you top your apple pie with anything?
No, like
No.
like Laura, that's not the way you do it, right? I'm from the
Okay.
South. I'm a Georgia boy, right? We just take the
Right.
apple pie and we just taking it all in. You don't need to put anything on it. It's just
Right. No,
it's
no
how
whipped
you make it.
cream.
That's
Right.
right.
You're a purist, an
I am
apple
a
pie
purist.
purist.
You take it out of the oven, you slice it up. It better still be warm, and then you go
Yes.
to town on it. That's how it works.
All right. All right. I am with it. I am here for that.
I'm getting
Um,
hungry.
I know, right?
Hmm.
I know it's not quite lunchtime here yet, artists. You're making us hungry.
Oh, sorry.
It's all right.
No, it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I am Laura Cathcart Robbins, and this is the only one in the room, but I'm never the only one in this room because, as usual, my boyfriend, producer, and co host, Scott Slaughter, who I call Hun, is here as well.
Hi, honey.
Hey, Hun. So, as I said, we're talking to Artis Stevens today. He is the president and CEO of Big Brothers Big Sisters of America. And I'm so excited for this conversation for so many reasons. Artists, I always ask our guests how they identify before we start. How do you identify?
I am the He series.
The He
So
series.
yeah, so you can definitely call me and identify me in that way.
Thank you. Thank you. So, when we talked at first, we had a conversation over Zoom, and I made the error of confusing Big Brothers Big Sisters with the Boys and Girls Club. Can you please explain the difference between these two amazing organizations?
Yeah, well, first let me say they are both great organizations, and they're
Yes.
organizations that I have a lot of history with, both organizations as well.
Right.
And here's probably the best way that I can explain it. Boys and Girls Clubs America, that most people are very familiar with, is a place-based youth development, truly focuses on after-school types of programs. So when kids get out of school at 3 p.m., they go to this safe place and a building, an actual physical building that they go
Right.
in and they have programs. Big Brothers Big Sisters is uniquely different, right? Because it's really about one-to-one mentoring. It's about the relationship between a positive adult and a young person. It's not based in the building. It can go anywhere a child is, anywhere a family is, and that's also what makes it so unique is that the program doesn't necessarily end when you leave high school. Like when you graduate from high school, it can stay with you for your lifetime, right? So
Mm.
we have stories of what we call bigs, which are the adults, and littles, who were young people at the time, that their relationships span over decades. And they
Wow.
talk about being in each other's weddings. They talk about seeing, like the big will say, I saw my littles when they were at the age of getting married and having their
Mm.
first child. They were in the hospital when their little
Oh.
families had their first child. So they're just extended relationships that last forever. That's not the way we like to say it. It has this sort of
Hmm.
forever of a lifetime that's connected to it.
I love that.
Mm.
That's so touching. Like I didn't even think about the beyond. I was only thinking about while they were 18 and under. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
But you meant no, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say it's the beauty of human connection, right? That's what I always
Yeah.
love to say about our organization. It's more than what people say about, oh, well, you serve young people. No, what we're about are relationships, human connection, right? In so many
Right.
different ways.
Well, and then that's actually what I was going to ask you next because you told me like where you grew up in a large family, right? You had a large family?
Yeah, there were 8 of us in my household.
You're right. That's a large family.
Yeah.
And you said everyone was responsible for everybody's kids where you grew up, and the relationship there were, I mean, relationships were currency. What did you mean by that? Do you remember telling me that?
I do. And
Yeah.
and and here's the context, Laura, right? Uh, we grew up when I grew up, and grew up in a small town. I grew up my family didn't have a lot of means, right? We didn't have a lot of money. Uh, but what we believed in, what my mom and my dad always instilled upon us and me and all my siblings, were that we were rich in relationships, right?
Mm,
And that was our currency. That the idea that you didn't have to have quote unquote money, right, to be rich in life. And they
right.
defined richness by a different type of measurement was really around the context of how rich are you in the relationships that you build in your life, the things you do for other people, the community that you generate and raise around you, and as well as the community that pours into you, and as well as you pour into them. So that always became our what we call our social currency, right? And became
Yeah.
social capital for me, and that sort of always stuck with me in life, and has been part of my journey and part of my purpose.
Wow. I love that. And that's that difference between wealth and riches, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
So you
right.
can have material wealth and you can have these, but you can be rich in these other ways, which um, are usually the more lasting ways and the more satisfying ways in those relationships. Uh, you come from a line of preachers, is that right?
I
Father,
do. I
grandfather?
do.
Yeah. And
I got preachers. We never found a microphone we didn't like, Laura.
um so you were a kid, right? And you asked, your grandfather was a preacher, your father was a preacher. You asked if you would be a preacher too. And tell me what he said back to you.
He said, "Son, everyone has their ministry in this world. You have to find yours, right?"
Yeah.
And I will tell you, when he told me that, I was 7 years old, by the way, when he told me that. And by the way, the backstory to that is that I had given a Sunday school lesson because all of my brothers and sisters had musical talent except for this guy, right?
Ah.
I used to be sleeping on the back pew in the church, right? They used to call me Sleeping Beauty, right? So, so one day I had to get up and give a Sunday school lesson. I gave the Sunday school lesson, and all of a sudden, all of these words started coming in my mouth. I didn't know where they were coming from, but they started to make
Mm.
sense. And then before I knew it, I looked up, and the entire church was giving me a standing ovation.
Wow.
And then everyone from that point started saying, "Oh, you're going to be a preacher like your dad and granddad. You're going to follow
Got
in their
it.
footsteps. You're
Yeah.
going to follow their path." And that was a lot of pressure for a 7-year-old kid to hear at that times, because
Yeah.
I thought I had to follow in my dad's footstep. And when he shared that insight with me, it was freeing, even at 7 years old, because it meant I didn't have to follow generational expectations. I didn't have
Hmm.
to be bound, and even extended beyond that. I didn't have to be bound by what people set in terms of parameters for me, whether it was the group, the community I grew up in, how much money we had, what I looked like. And it was this freeing sense of being
Mm.
able to walk your own path and have your own purpose, because it was that line, but it was also the actions that my dad, my family, and others treated me to say, "Hey, feel empowered to do the things that fit you, that give you
Right.
guidance, that gives you that fuel."
Yeah. And also, it also allowed you to find your own ministry, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Which is
that's
what we're going
right.
to talk about because that was in your future, but it just expanded the ways that you could participate in that and carry that message. Uh,
Yeah,
you mentioned the Boys and Girls Club being a part of that organization. You have a really extensive, incredible resume. Were you the first in your family to go to college? I have that in my notes.
yeah. First in
And,
my family to go to college.
wow. Wow. And then did you go to law school?
No, I didn't go to law school. It's I was planning to go
You
to
were
law
planning to
school.
go to law school. So then
Yeah,
tell me a little bit about what the trajectory of your life was after college.
yeah. I thought I was going to law school. I was ready and I was prepared, and I actually was taking a break before the little periods you have before you go on to your next phase of school during the summer. And I went back home, and this incredible, inspiring community leader who became a lifelong mentor for me, said to me, "Hey, I hear you're going on, for law. You should, interview for this position." And I said, "Well, I'll interview just to get practice, right,
Mhm.
on how to get in front of people." So I went and interviewed for it, and then he said, "Let me take you somewhere. I want to show you something." I said, "Okay." So we got in his car. He took me to a public housing community, and he took me to a playground in this public housing community. And he asked me, what did I know about the playground? And I just started smiling and laughing. And I said, this was the playground I played in as a kid, right?
Mm.
And he said, you can always go to law school, but you can't always come home to the community you grew up in and transform it, right?
Wow.
Um, and it hit me because I was like, this is a moment, and this is one of those like crossroad moments where the road diverges. Is am I going to go to law school, or am I going to stay in my community and do this?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, his words just spoke to me, and I accepted
Mm.
it, and it ended up really transforming my life and putting me on the path that I walked over the last 25 years in youth development, community development, building public-private partnerships. It was all from that one decision and inspiration.
That's, and you think about that, like taking the time out to do something like that, not only changed your life, but the lives of everyone that you've touched since then. It just
Yeah.
that like that one moment, that's just crazy to me and wonderful, you know?
Yeah, and isn't that right? Isn't that the idea of our lives, right?
Yeah,
We all are faced with those decisions. We all are faced with those choices in our lives, and it's the choices that sort of sometimes you look at. Sometimes they're as clear as that one, right? Other times
right.
they're not so clear, right? That they
Right.
can be these things that we just do, occasionally, and they come in our life, but we make those decisions that have those ripple effects that take us
Mhm.
into a place in our life that we would never imagine. And sometimes it's not until we look back and we really appreciate and realize it.
Yes. So so you're this extremely qualified candidate, and there's this 116-year-old organization that's never had a Black person at the helm. And
Hmm.
it's an organization that deals with, for the most part, with children of color,
Yeah.
and for the most part, where the mentors are white.
Hmm.
Why was it important to bring a Black person in now, and why were you the right person for the job?
Yeah. Well, I would say why it was important. It should have been important years and years ago, right? So let's just acknowledge and establish that, right?
Yes.
Um, but here's what also say that um, I'm the first, but I won't be the last, right? And I say that, and I really mean that because that is the idea of what I remember in my life and the people that's blazed the trail for me, right? Someone has to open the door. Someone has to walk through the door the first time so that others can walk through the door as well. So part of it for me is the appreciation of knowing that I'm in a place where I'm able to open the door, but people got me there. I'm standing on the shoulders of
Right.
giants, right? The other place is the symbol, one that it means in terms of other people, young people, professionals, people in my industry, people outside of my industry seeing me. I can't tell you how many times, Laura, I get asked the question of, "Gosh, what was your path? How did you get from where you were to
Mhm.
CEO?" Right, and being
Mhm.
able to talk to people about that and about the idea of what it takes and what it means and the responsibility and the accountability that I have, but also what it means in terms of how I got there because I didn't get here alone. Right, it took other people as mentors and support to help me to get along the way. And then, to the other part of your question was, and I think, and remind me, was it around the focus of what does it mean in terms of what I'm doing?
Well, yeah, why are you the right person for this? You
Yeah,
know?
yeah. Well, first and foremost is what you said. I've lived this experience.
Yeah.
I feel like I've been born to do this, right? And from my upbringing and my background, all being in this space, and I've worked hard. I've worked hard and committed to growing in this space, being a leader in this space, and improving and creating outcomes in it. But I will say
Right.
the thing that I would say is probably most resonating to me is that the young people that we serve, the communities that we serve, right? My passion, my commitment is to this work.
Yeah.
And when I truly talk about my dad's words that I shared earlier, I truly feel like this is my ministry, right? This is more
Yes.
than just the idea of working a job. I'm the CEO, right? I'm following my calling. I'm following my ministry.
Yeah. And you and I were actually put together because of an article that I wrote about how a Black school principal changed my life.
Hmm.
The fact that she was there, that representation was available to me while I was growing up. And that's how you and I got connected. The question has come up for me, and I bet it's come up for you. Why can't we just tell children who don't see themselves represented in leadership positions, that they can that's something that they can do, that's a trajectory they can have. Why do we have to show them? Why does there have to be a leader of color in those positions? Why does representation matter so much?
Yeah, it's like anything else in life that we do, we see, we imitate. Most of it is through the action. Most of it is through visual. Most of it is through what we see in other people. It's
Yeah.
not simply what we hear, right? Realization comes through visualization, right? And
Yes.
that is part of the powerful idea of what we do in modeling for others. So, I spent and most of us can sort of talk about this when you've been in a community of color and grew up in this lived experience that I spent an entire childhood growing up not seeing myself right, not seeing
Mhm.
myself in positions of power, not seeing myself on even the characters that I loved, right, all the
Yes.
dolls and all of the action figures and all the different things you bought never looked like you. And my friends who were different ethnic or racial background from me, could always talk about themselves and say, "Hey, he looks like you," and
Mhm.
then when they got to me, I'm just sitting there and I'm like, nobody looks like me, right? I got to
Right.
project myself onto their image and their
Mhm.
viewpoints, and that is what gets trapped in your mind. Am I good enough? Right? Can I do this? And is that a road and a pathway for me? And it was to the point, and I never had the opportunity. And God bless like all of my family members who were incredible, but I didn't have someone right there in the immediate who went to college, right? It wasn't until later on that I had the opportunity to see someone who looked like me who went to college, and I said,
Mhm.
"Oh, this is something I can do," right?
Right.
Because this person who looks like me that comes from the same background did it. And I say all that too, Laura, to say, do we absolutely need mentors and different people from all backgrounds and experiences? Absolutely, right? That enriches our lives and it stretches us and it brings us into other places. But
Yeah.
at the core of who we are, we also need the appreciation of people who represent and look like us and come from places like us so that we can see that the path that we're walking is not an impossible path. And that's what, like, part of being in this role that I'm most excited about it, that young people see me and they say, well, if I can see it, I can be it. And that becomes a true
Yes.
adage.
Yeah. I mean, that is so true. I'm just so pleased that you are in this role articulating this message. I think that you are going to inspire so many people to come in, including myself, to be mentors. So you told me, I know I have this right, that you don't believe in saving kids. You said the mentoring process is a reciprocal relationship. Can you talk to me a little bit about that process, about like signing up and getting matched and what that looks like?
Yeah. Typically, what happens for a lot of our relationships is a volunteer comes to Big Brothers Big Sisters and they say, "Hey, I want to be a mentor," right?
Right.
Um, and then we start to take them through the process, right? And then once they go through the process, they have, and it's not everyone, but it's a lot of our mentors come in. It's
Mm.
like, I'm coming in, and guess what? I'm going to save this kid's life, right?
Right.
I'm going to like just save their lives. And they come in, and do they make a significant impact? Absolutely, they do. They make a significant impact in the lives of young people that we serve. But I will tell you, 9 out of 10 will come back to us and say, you know what? I came in thinking I was going to do all these different things for this young person, and
Mm.
what ultimately ended up happening is what they did for me.
Yeah.
Right? They opened up my eyes to things I never saw before. They made me stretch in ways that I never thought that I could stretch. They gave me appreciation, understanding from various backgrounds and different communities that I never even thought about the intentionality of exploring or engaging. And I'm a better person because of them. I'm a better person because of their family, right?
Yeah.
That's reciprocal mentoring, right? And when we set relationships, we're very intentional about it, because one of the things we do in our mentoring relationships is that when you sit down with a young person, we have a match support specialist, which is a full-time staff person, who says you create a co-plan together. You co-create a plan, and the young person has to give their voice to the plan, right? So we don't create plans for
Mm.
youth, right? Because we don't believe
Oh,
in saving kids, right?
right.
The young person comes in and says, here's what I want to happen in the relationship. Here's my expectations, right? Here's what I want to get out of it. and that becomes the core of how the relationship works. So this is not something being delivered to our youth, but it's being something that our youth feel like their voice and their actions are empowered through it.
Mm. Yeah, that's great. That's great. I love that people come in thinking I'm going to save a child and then end up getting saved themselves, maybe not even knowing that they needed to be saved or that they need their lives to be enriched in this
So
way.
often, yeah,
Yeah.
it's so often the case.
What about non-binary folk? Do you have is there a program
Mhm.
for them? Do you match them with other non-binary folk? Like how does that work?
Yeah, we have an initiative that we launched I think yeah, 3.5 years ago called Big Pride. And it's one of our fastest growing initiatives. And what we started to see was that we had a lot of young people who were non-binary, who were part of the broader LGBTQ plus community, who they were feeling this sense of isolation, right?
Mm,
Um, and I will tell you, in a lot of cases, with the community that the communities that we serve, particularly in this community, there's sometimes the young person who feels ostracized by their parent. So this is not sometimes a kid, like a lot of times you think about the scenarios of kids being in single parent households, right?
right.
And sometimes in these scenarios, they have two parents, but the parents feel uncomfortable. They feel they don't know how to embrace, right? They feel that maybe, and you know all the stories just as well as I do. Something's wrong with the kid or something of, and where we come in because a lot of it is sometimes referred through social services to us or through the mental health system to us to be able to work with these communities, and we bring mentors who can identify with these kids, right?
Mm,
So it is what we believe in is that we're going to match people and match relationships together who match with each other, no matter where their background is. We serve
great.
every single kid, and we're going to bring everybody in this community to ensure that kids feel like they belong and feel like they're connected. So that is one of our, and it's one of the ones that I'm most proud of. The initiative. Do we still, by the way, do we still have more work to do? Absolutely, right? It's still not enough, and there's still so much more work to do. But I was one of the programs that I've been most proud of is the work that we're doing in transgender
Mm,
communities, where we're focusing a lot on how do we connect transgender mentors with transgender young people so that they're able to sort of see people who are going through some of the same
yeah.
experiences and the social context that they're going through as well.
I love that. I love that. I did not expect you to have that answer. I thought it was just going to be like this is something we're going to be looking at in the future, but you're already into it. And I'm a it says in my Instagram profile, I'm an inclusionist. I want to make sure that everybody feels included.
Yeah,
And that just warms my heart that you're taking those steps to make sure that anybody who wants a mentor or a mentee will feel there's a match for them, somebody who can match their experience. It's
yeah.
amazing.
Laura, what we
Um,
believe in,
yeah,
and I'll just say this quickly, like we believe our journey is a journey, and what we believe in is that if we're going, we have to walk the talk, right? If we're going to say we're a Jedi focused youth empowerment organization, we have to walk that talk,
yeah.
and we have to go on that journey to make sure that we're being as inclusive as possible.
Yes. Yes. Well, and you don't have to, but you're choosing to as an
Yeah,
organization because
yeah,
you know, some people don't and they just focus on what they have the experience with and don't try to broaden and bring in other people. So that just, hats off to what you're doing. And actually that's what I wanted to ask you next is so we talked about you're the first black president of Big Brothers Big Sisters of America, and we know what that means for people who look like us, right?
mhm.
But what are you doing differently than your predecessors, like with regard to marketing strategies or partnerships or anything like that? Is there something specific, or are there specifics that you're doing differently than your predecessors have done?
Yeah. Well, one of the things is knowing that today we have 30,000 kids on our waiting list, right? And those 30,000 kids are mostly boys, right? They're
Right.
mostly boys. So one of the things that we've launched much more comprehensively is how we attract men, and particularly men of color into it. And you notice I didn't say recruit, attract, right?
Yes.
Because
Yes.
it's very different in that terminology. So one of the biggest initiatives that we're doing is working with partnerships, right? We're working with groups both locally on the grassroots level, but also national groups like Black fraternities,
Mm.
and other organizations that allow us that men traditionally engage in a lot to be able to create those types of connections. One of our biggest partnerships is with the NFL, where we've created sort of what we call the big draft. So right now this week, players have been drafted for NFL teams. Where we're working with local NFL teams to draft mentors as well, so that we can use the power of that marketing vehicle to help us to draft and recruit mentors. And we're looking at doing even more in that space through not just these media and marketing partnerships, but also through just programmatic efforts that allow us to ensure that when men come to the table, and particularly the men that we're trying to attract, that they feel like the experience is for them. They feel like they're
Mm.
welcome and there's a welcome
Yeah.
mat for them. And then a couple others, just really quick, is we are serving our fastest growing population that we're serving. We traditionally serve 5 to 18, but our fastest growing population is 18 to 25, actually. Young adults, because they're graduating high school and they don't know where to go, right? A lot of our
Mm.
young people are figuring out, like, what's my next step in career, in college, is it enlistment, is it other things? So we're matching more mentors who can give career guidance, career experiences, and career programmatic mentoring to support young people, so that we can be a solution to both the young people, but also to companies who come to us and say, we're looking to diversify and widen our experience for our workforce and engage our employees effectively. And then the third thing I would say is technology, right? Which I think is
Yes.
just such a key vehicle for engagement. And it's really about how do we create connections for young people and mentors that otherwise would have never happened. So imagine you being a mentor in Los Angeles, and then there's a young person in like middle town Iowa, right?
Mm.
That you still can have some level of connection with, and we can create connections for mentors and young people safely. But we can create those types of connections where we wouldn't have been able to create those types of connections and connect young people and mentors in a way that can still be positive and supportive for both their lives.
That is so I didn't think about that either. That is amazing because first of all, just where you started with 30,000 people on the waiting, did you say 30,000 boys on the waiting list or 30,000 people?
30,000 kids. Yeah,
30,000
30,000 kids.
kids, and the majority of them are boys. Is that right?
Majority are boys.
Boys of color.
Hmm.
Yeah. I just wanted to let that sink in for a second because if you could visualize that, like, in a stadium or in an auditorium, 30,000 people waiting to be matched,
Yeah,
um, which it is overwhelming, right? And
yeah.
so you're just doing the work to try to bring in the people who can then match with these kids and go on that journey with them. Um, so this is the part I told you about. I want you to attract me. You say you don't recruit. So attract me to Big Brothers Big Sisters. I live in Los Angeles.
Hmm.
I didn't graduate from high school. I didn't go to college. I'm an
Yeah.
author, I'm a writer, I'm a
Hmm.
podcaster. Super busy schedule. I don't like to leave my house if I don't have to. So I don't know what I have to offer. I don't even know if I have time to offer what I might have to offer. So what do you say to someone like me about becoming a mentor?
Yeah, the first thing that I say to everything you just said, because I think a lot of times people come to the table and they talk about all the things that they don't have, right?
Right.
And it comes from a place of deficit, right? The deficit that I don't have, and what I always try to tell people is what you do have, and everything
Mm,
that you do bring to the table, your lived experience, the assets of who you are as a person, your time is a
yeah.
value and it's important. And the one line I always tell everyone is that you don't have to be perfect, you just need to be present and persistent in young people's lives, right?
Yes.
That's the meaning. And and the other thing that you said, because it's another big thing that we hear all the time, is time, right?
Yeah.
I'm just busy. I don't have the time. Well, you'll be surprised that how easy it is and how turnkey it is to make a difference in a young person's life. Typically for us, you're talking 2 times a month that you have, which maybe is 45 minutes to an hour with a young person to make a difference in their lives. Most of our mentors start off that way. They choose, not the young person, they choose
Hmm.
to go more and beyond that because they enjoy it and they get so immersed. But even in cases where people don't have the time to get involved, what we do is we find ways for them to get involved, whether it's modeling, whether it's giving their voice to the organization. So there's so many different ways that you can affect and impact a young person's life, and we're here to help you to do that.
That's great. What kind of things would do you do with a mentee? Like,
Yeah.
give me virtual and in person.
Yeah. Let me start with in person, right?
Yeah.
The majority of the activities that happen between a big and a little is typically it's just having fun. It is going out to the park. It is hanging out at a movie. It is going to see a game. It may even be doing homework sometimes,
Mhm.
right? But
Mhm.
but it's the time that you just spending quality together, and most of it is what we call free time, and free not just free time as free, but it's like it's not anything you got to pay for. You get what I mean? It's
Yes.
it's it's the basic things of just hanging out because most of our kids they just want time, support, and attention. So a lot of that happens in person. Um, Online, a lot of it's conversational, right? And it's
Mhm.
coaching, it's support, it's just being a listening ear, right? Now, do we provide other types of experiences for our bigs and our littles to experience? Like we just sponsor one of our bigs and little programs to go to the Super Bowl, right?
Oh,
Yeah. Do we do
wow.
those types of moments and big
Yeah.
types of things too? Yeah, that's part of the package as well. But that's not what the expectation when you get involved. And I mentioned something earlier that I think is important. We're seeing more and more, particularly with older youth, who
Mhm.
are looking for a career consult, support, guidance. So we're seeing much more of skill based mentoring where now a young person is being matched with an adult and they're teaching them skills or they're talking to them about their work experience and their career experience and helping to coach and support. Some of our best relationships are mentors who are helping kids get through like financial aid applications or understanding what it is
Yes.
to interview for your first job. Do you remember when you interviewed for your first job?
I
Think
do.
about that.
Yeah.
And all the things that sometimes people don't tell you that you're supposed to do that you don't do,
Right.
and having someone in your corner that can help support you in that way is critically important.
That's great. That's great. And so, do you do they come all the stuff you mentioned was outside the house. Do you ever go to their house? Do they ever come to yours? You can
Yeah.
do that as well?
Yeah, so we have one of the things we truly believe in is safety first, right? So there is a process that and we always have a staff person that's connected into the mentoring relationship. That's what we call a match support specialist, right? They're
Okay.
responsible for ensuring that that relationship is working. They're doing assessments, they're doing insights, they're working with the family, the volunteer, and the young person. But there's a process before you're doing home visits or the young persons because we have to ensure that the safety of the child is
Mhm.
first and foremost in the frontier. But once we get through that process, and then the family, of course, is in agreement and in alignment, what you
Yeah.
see is the big, who's the volunteer, really spending time connecting with both their little, but also the family of the little as well. So we incorporate it as part of our program. The other thing that's really interesting about our program is that it's not always just one big and a little. Sometimes we do what we call big couples, right?
Mm.
So take the two of you all, right? So
Right?
like you and Scott could be a big couple. So you actually mentor a child together, right? So it gives a sort of a couple aspect to it to really sort of bring that aspect of family and gives our couples different ways to sort of engage as well.
That's so cool. Hun, we could be a big couple.
Yeah, I know. You would have me do all the errands.
Yes. As usual. As
Uh-huh.
usual. Um,
That would
uh,
be fine.
these are fascinating answers that you're giving me. I just have a couple more questions for you.
Mhm.
You mentioned that to me during our previous conversation that 55% of the mentees live in poverty.
Yeah.
Does a mentor ever give their mentee money? Is that something that? I mean, I'm sure it's happened at some point, but is that part of what they do? Or like, can you not do that?
We encourage our mentors not to do that, right?
Okay.
We don't want to create that level of dependency or that level of expectation with
Right.
our mentors. And I will tell you, most of our families, parents, don't want that either, right? That's not
Yes.
what they want to happen in the relationship. Um, I will tell you one thing that our mentors do, and this is where our model is going, is that because a lot of our families live in poverty, and which means sometimes they lack because they live in underserved communities and they lack the resources they need. What we are doing is building partnerships. So we our model is called 1-to-1 plus now, and that
Mm.
plus side is all the various services that we can bring into a young person's life. And sometimes that the parent may not see something that the kid needs that the volunteer, the mentor may see. They're able to raise their hand and say, "Hey, I think it would be helpful as artists had this kind of service to
Mhm.
support him." Then our staff is able to work with the family and a partner that they have to bring and curate those kind of services into a young person's and sometimes their families' lives.
Yeah. Yeah. I can totally see that. That makes more sense too than just kind of donating, especially if the family's not in consent of that
That's right.
donation coming in. I so this big couple, Scott and I, we have a friend. They are white parents who've adopted a black child,
Hmm.
and they are signing. They're going to be very interested in this episode. We've already told them about it. They're signing their child up to be a little sister. Um, so in particular, so that she can see more black adult role models or
Hmm.
have that in her life. What what could they expect? What's in front of them with that?
Yeah. Yeah, here's what I would say to them is the to stay to really communicate with the local big brothers, big sisters that they go to in terms of what you just said, what their expectation is, right?
Yeah.
To ensure, I'm not sure how old their child is, but to ensure their child's voice, no matter what age their child is included in that process, so that they do it together as a family. There's a clear set of expectations of what they're looking for a volunteer, for a mentor to come in their child's life and be supportive. And then when it happens, you have to be a partner, right?
Mhm.
And one of the big things you have to do is to ensure that you feel comfortable that someone who's going to come into their life may show them certain things that you may not be able to show them, and you have to feel comfortable with it, right? And
Right.
you have to feel okay that that's part of your child's experience and that's part of the experience that you want. I'm not saying it happens overnight, but
Sure.
it's something that you have to sort of stick with and say, we know how important this is for our child. So the level of being comfort, and one of the ways you do that is I will say, and we always offer this: spend time with a volunteer. Ensure that the volunteer comes. What I just said earlier, like you guys are spending time, they're coming over to your house, that you're building a relationship just as much as your child is building a relationship with them as well.
Mhm. Thank you. Thank you for that. They'll be very grateful to hear the actual president of Big Brothers and Big Sisters of America give them advice for their child, and their experience. We talked before about the qualities of a good mentor being like patience and tolerance and
Hmm.
time, consistency. Are these things that someone can develop in the big brother, big sister? You know what I mean? In that
Yeah.
can the bigs develop that in the relationship, or do you want them to have that before they come into it?
Well, they can develop it, but I think fundamentally, before they start working with kids, you want them to
Yeah.
have some of it, right? You want
Right.
them. You're like, I don't have any patience for kids, but I'm going to try to think out. I'm just going to see what happens, right?
I
So,
bet it happens though.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
hilarious.
yeah, but it grows, right? I
Right.
think that's the beauty of what you just said, Laura. I think you grow as you get
Yeah.
into it because you have a willingness to come in and try it and try to put the one common denominator that we see all the time with our bigs is that they are willing to be persistent and to be there, right? You got to have that, and then from there you can build out a lot of other things. But if you don't have the core of that, I want to be here for a kid and I'm going to
Yes.
stick it out, even
Yeah.
in challenging times, because it doesn't always click on day one. But if you're persistent with it truly turns out to be a beautiful relationship.
Mm. All right. And then So for people who are listening and or watching us today, h- how do they go sign up? What's the first thing they should do? Obviously, pull up the website and then, which is bigbrothersbigsisters.org.
It's BBBS,
Uh huh.
so BBBS.org. You can go
Okay.
to our website there. And what's really easy is you can put your zip code in. And when you put your zip code in the website, the closest Big Brother, Big Sisters local affiliates will pull up for you to be able to contact a local affiliate that's next to you. And the other thing I will say is, for some people who may say, hey, I'm not at that point yet. I'm still sort of deciding, and I want to get to that point. Remember, these things don't happen for free either, right? We have to pay our staff. We have to support those types of things. So you can always invest, right? So it gives you an opportunity to donate and support your local organization, or if you want to support national efforts, you can do it that way. And then the third thing I always tell people is that you can use your voice, right? We constantly need people telling a story like what you're doing here. And you can
Mm-hmm.
do that through your social media, through your networks. We have content that you can use that's on our website, or you can go on our social media sites and promote it. And then people can follow me as well at Artis Stevens on LinkedIn or Twitter to stay abreast and to stay connected. And then the last thing I always tell folks, whether it's with Big Brothers, Big Sisters or not, mentor a child, get in a child's life, be an influence no matter who the organization, no matter what the community, no matter what the family is, influence a child's life. And you start that just by the actions you take and getting involved.
Amazing. Amazing. Artist, thank you so much. You actually did all my closing spiel there because you gave your socials. You said where people can find you. And that call to action to mentor a child, to be an influence in a child's life, coming from the president and CEO of Big Brothers Big Sisters of America. It is a powerful message that you have, and I'm so glad that we were able to get this together so that you could come and tell it to us and to our listeners. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me again, Laura. And let me just say, you and Scott are so cute.
Thank you,
I,
artist.
I love it.
Uh,
We're gonna
yeah,
be a cute big couple, hon.
we are. We're a
There we
cute
go.
big couple. Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much for coming,
artist.
artist.
Thank you all. I really appreciate it. I'm Artis Stevens, and I'm the first and only Black president and CEO of Big Brothers Big Sisters of America.